Okay, guys, a couple people had questions about what we are doing today. I did give you a video to watch, and that video has everything that you need to know. But if you are still having a little bit of trouble, I'm going to take a couple minutes here to go through some examples that are in our notebook so that you can see how to do this. All right? So we have two different kinds of special triangles. What do we mean special triangles? Well, here is our first special triangle. It's any triangle that is 45 degrees, 45 degrees, and 90 degrees. So look at this triangle. It has 45 here, 45 here, and then 90 degrees here. All right, so this is a special triangle. It's 40, 40, 45, 45, 90. All right. If you see any triangle, it doesn't matter how big it is. It could be a small 45, 45, 90 or a big 45, 45, 90. But there's something special about 45, 45, 90 triangles. What is special about them? Well, the sides have a special ratio, all right? Meaning that if we know one of the sides, then we can know the other sides. For example, in this triangle, they said, we know that this side is x. Well, if it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle, that means that the other leg has to be x. All right, so this is one leg is x. The other leg has to also be x. It has to be the same. It doesn't matter what x is. It could be 1, 2, 3. If this was 3, then this one has to be 3 also. All right? And then the other side, the hypotenuse of a 45, 45, 90 triangle will always be x times the square root of 2. All right. So that's what we know about a 45, 45, 90. So I'm going to go now to our some practice problems and we'll see how do we use this. All right. So let's look at this problem here. It tells us that this side is 10. Okay. But we also know that this is 90 degrees, this is 45 degrees. If this is 45 and this is 90, that means this has to be 45 too. Which means this is a 45, 45, 90 special triangle, right? If we know this is a 45, 45, 90 special triangle, that means that this side, the hypotenuse, is always going to be the square root of 2 times whatever this side is. So what is this side here? It's 10. So that means x has to be 10 times the square root of 2. That's it. We're done. All right. Remember, the hypotenuse for a 45, 45, 90 triangle is always the square root of 2 times the leg. All right? Got that. All right, let's look again. Let's look at another one. Now, in this one, they told us both of the legs. All right, here's the leg. Here's a leg. We know they're both the same. Square root of 2 divided by 2. Is this a 45, 45, 90? Yes, because it's isosceles. All 90-degree isosceles triangles have to be the same. All right? Remember we learned the base angles theorem for isosceles triangles? It means these two angles have to be equal. And the only way for them to be equal is if they're both 45, all right? So we know that this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And since x is the hypotenuse, the opposite of the right angle, that means x has to be the square root of 2. So x has to equal the square root of 2 times one of the sides. Well, what is the side? It's this. The square root of 2 over 2 divided by 2. All right, so we have to do that. Now, how do we solve this? Well, remember, when you take the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, that means the square root is going to go away because they're both the same. Square root of 2, They go away. That's the square root of 2 squared, which is just 2. All right? So this is going to end up being 2, right? Because it's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. And then it's going to be over 2, which is actually just 1. All right? So the answer for this one is 1. X equals 1. All right? Okay, so we've got those two. Let's do one more. All right? One more example for a 45, 45, 90 triangle. All right, again, here we have two legs. One is X, the other is X. They're the same. So again, this is isosceles triangle. Two of the sides are the same, which means that this angle and this angle have to be 45 degrees. So we know that this is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, which means that this, but this time is a little bit different, right? Because before we did not know the hypotenuse. Now we do know the hypotenuse. And remember, the hypotenuse is always the leg times the square root of 2. But now we just know that leg is X, and we know the hypotenuse is 8 times the square root of 2. Well, what does that mean? It means that X times the square root of 2 has to equal this, which is 8 times the square root of 2, right? Well, we can divide both sides by the square root of 2, right? And then this is going to go away, and this is going to go away, and we're going to have X on this side equals what? 8. And that's the answer. Okay? So that's how we do these, all right? You can use that X, and then the square root of 2 times X can help us to find any of the sides. If we know one side, we can find the other sides. That's why it's a special triangle. Now, let's go back up to our notes, because there's one more kind of special triangle that we need to learn. It's called the 30, 60, 90 triangle, right? The 30, 60, 90. So if we see a triangle, it's got to be a right triangle because that's the 90, right? 90, and then this is 30, and then this is 60. This is another special triangle. Now, what is special about this triangle? Well, we know that if the short side, if it is X, all right, then the long side, the hypotenuse, right, is always going to be 2 times X. And then this other side, the other leg, the longer leg, is going to be X times the square root of 3. All right? So this one's a little bit more difficult. There's more things to remember. If we know this side is X, then this side is always 2X, and this side is always going to be X times the square root of 3. All right. So how do we use that? Well, let's look at some examples. Let's go back down here, okay? So here we have a right triangle, 90, 30, and that means this one has to be 60, all right? Because 60 plus 30 plus 90 equals 180, all right? So this has to be 60. All right, so we have our special triangle, 30, 60, 90. Good. And they told the short leg over here is 15. Well, we just learned that if the short leg is 15, then the hypotenuse has to be 2 times 15. So y here is going to be 2 times 15, which is what? What is 2 times 15? 30. All right? We know that y has to be 30. Good. That's our first answer. But we also need to find x. Well, we just said that x is the square root of 3 times the short side. All right? So that means x is going to be the square root of 3 times the short side, which is 15. So how do we write that? We usually write that with the whole number in front. So 15 times the square root of 3. And that's it. That's all you have to write. You don't have to do anything else. Don't write a decimal point. If you multiply this out, it'll be 20 something point blah 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 blah. I don't want that. All right? We want an exact answer. This is the answer. So just write this. And we're done. Y equals 30, x equals 15 times the square root of 3. Good? All right. One more. We'll do one more example. All right. Let's look at this one. Again, we have 90. We have 60. That means this has to be 30. All right. And remember, we just learned that if this is a 30, 60, 90, that means the short leg over here times 2 will equal the hypotenuse, which is this side, the long one. All right. So that means 2 times y has to equal 22. So we can write that. We know that 2 times y has to equal 22. All right? But if 2 times y equals 22, that means y has to be 11. All right, good. We got our first part, 11. We're done with finding y. Now we just need to find x. But we already know that x, which is the long leg, is always the square root of 3 times the short leg. So the short leg is 11, so that means x has to be 11 times the square root of 3. And that's it. We're done. That's all we have to write. All right? X equals this, y equals that, and we're done. Okay? So you can use that now to go into your homework. All the problems are exactly like these ones. All right? All the problems in your homework tonight are exactly like these. Okay?